Alright, hi everybody, my name's Gabby and I make hiking and backpacking videos. This past year I hiked 500 miles of the Appalachian Trail. I went out to Georgia back in March of 2023 attempting a northbound thru-hike and made it about 70 miles before I went home. Then I went back out on trail again to Harpers Ferry, West Virginia to do a long section hike, and I hiked 430 miles to Connecticut. And today I'm going to make a video talking about what I learned going back out on the Appalachian Trail after quitting my thru-hike. So the first thing that I learned is how important it is to have a proper sleep system. When I went out to Georgia, I did not have the best sleep system. I did use my sleep system a couple times on some shakedown hikes and it was okay. I would wake up a lot throughout the night and I just chalked that up to being the fact that I'm not used to sleeping outside, and I thought that that was normal and that eventually I would get used to sleeping outside and I would be able to sleep better, but that was not the case. So in Georgia I was having a horrible time sleeping. I was up all night, every hour, and it would really make me dread going to camp because I would dread going to sleep at night and being up all night. So before I went out on this past long section, I made some adjustments to my sleep system and it made a world of a difference. On this past section hike, I was actually able to sleep. I pretty much slept through the night. I would wake up maybe once or twice and I would pretty much go back to bed quickly after waking up. And I just felt like that made such a difference in my mental state, you know, how much I was enjoying going to camp and the hike in general, but it also really helped me physically, obviously, because getting good sleep made it easier for me to hike throughout the day. So sleep system is so important. Even if it adds extra weight to your pack, make sure your sleep system is comfortable for you. Test it out, make sure you're sleeping through the night. And if you're interested in what changes I made to my sleep system, I did make a video talking about my gear changes after the Appalachian Trail, so if you want to check that out, that's on my channel. The next thing I learned on this past section hike is that I actually don't enjoy pushing big miles. I like to take in the scenery and spend time at camp. So on this past section I did do some bigger mileage days. About 2 weeks in I was doing some 16 to 18 mile days, and by my third week I did a 20 mile day. But I definitely was pushing myself a little bit. I'm literally 0.4 from the shelter and I'm just shot. Like, I'm like over hiking. I've pushed myself too hard the last 2 weeks. Not to the point of getting hurt, but I was pushing myself because I was hiking with some northbound hikers and I was enjoying their company and I wanted to see what I was capable of. And the terrain wasn't too difficult, but I definitely found that on those days I was getting irritable by the end of the day. I was very tired. And it would take me most of the day because of the fact that I didn't have trail legs yet, so I wouldn't have a lot of time at camp at night, and then I would wake up pretty early in the morning with everybody and go. And I just found that I was not enjoying the hike that much when I was pushing myself. I was losing motivation and kind of getting irritable some days, so once I dropped down my mileage a little bit, I noticed that I was enjoying myself more. I really like being able to wake up whenever. I mean, I don't feel like there's a need to set an alarm or be like, I have to be up at 6 a.m. Like, this isn't a job. I'm not going to work. Like, wake up when you want to wake up. And then I like to hike throughout the day, take breaks, take in the scenery, sit at viewpoints, and get to camp probably around 5, 6 o'clock ideally, and be able to socialize or hang out in my tent for a couple hours and just lay down and relax without feeling like I need to set up, eat, and go to bed. So I like an average of 11 to 15 miles a day. I think that's like a pretty happy number for me. And yeah, I'm not a big fan of just pushing big miles. So another thing that I learned is how to cook better. When I went out to Georgia, I had used my cook system a few times. I generally knew how to use it, but I was eating a lot of dehydrated meals that people gifted to me, so all I had to do was boil water and pour it into the bag. But on this past section, I was trying to save money by eating cheaper meals like ramen and North sides, mac and cheese, or rice, and so I had to do a little more cooking. And in the beginning, I was bad. I was burning things to the bottom of my pot. I was getting things stuck to the bottom. You know, it takes a little bit to realize how hot those titanium pots get, and you know, how to adjust the heat and stuff so you're not burning things to the bottom of the pot. So I did that a lot. I also boiled water on myself at one point. And it took a little bit of, you know, practice to figure out like how to keep the water at a simmer but not have it boil up over myself. So that's actually, if for whoever doesn't know, that's how I got my trail name Scorched, just because I literally was burning everything to my pot and burning all the food that I was making for at least a week or two. So I learned how to cook better by the end of the section. I can cook meals better now. You know, I learned what meals I need to be stirring while it's boiling so it doesn't get stuck. So it just took some practice, but I did learn how to do that better on this past section. The next thing I learned is that you will slowly build up miles, but that 8 to 12 miles a day is really doable at first and probably what you should be doing. It depends upon your fitness level when you go out, but that's what I found worked for me. So when I started, I was doing 10 to 12 miles a day with some 8-mile days sprinkled in here or there. And within a couple weeks I did up my mileage because I started hiking with a couple groups of northbound hikers that were hiking from Georgia. So obviously they had capability of hiking more miles, so I was trying to keep up with some of them. By choice, I knew I would break off from them eventually, but I was trying to push myself a little bit. And it's interesting how you really do build up miles. In the beginning, 10 to 12 miles a day, I was pretty tired by the end of the day. My feet were tired. But then as the section hike went on, it got to the point where a 10 to 11 mile day was like a shorter day for me, or even a Nero. I would do there was one day going into Duncannon, we hiked 11 miles by like 12 o'clock, 11:30, 12. And we were in town by 12 and at the hostel, and we got to do all our town chores and hang out and have the rest of the day to hang out and relax. So that was crazy to me that an 11-mile day felt like an easier day at that point. So you really do build up miles and your body does get stronger. It just takes time, but you'd be surprised, even starting out doing 10 miles a day and being tired, you're gonna get to the point where 10 miles is nothing. The next thing I learned is getting more comfortable with calling hostels and shuttle drivers. When I went down to Georgia, I had only gone out for like 2 to 3 days before on a backpacking trip, so I never had a reason to have to call shuttle drivers or try to get into hostels. So when I went to Georgia, that was my first time doing that, and it really freaked me out. I didn't love the idea of the fact that just to get a shower and a bed, I had to sit and like call places and ask if they have availability and then wait for them to send somebody out to get me or call shuttle drivers. And I remember there was one day I had to call a shuttle driver to take me to Above the Clouds hostel, and I was sitting there in the rain waiting for him, and I was just thinking to myself, I cannot do this for 6 months just to get a bed and a shower. But it's really not that bad. On this past section hike, I got a lot more comfortable with the routine of long distance backpacking and with doing that with calling shuttles and hostels, and you realize that people really want to help you out there. There's shuttles posted all throughout Far Out, tons of shuttle drivers numbers. You can hitchhike. There's tons of hostels, especially in the South, and that's what they're there for, is to help you and give you a place to stay. They don't mind if you're calling them. They'll usually sometimes have somebody that they can send to get you, but if not, there's tons of shuttle drivers, tons of trail angels that will help you out. In Pennsylvania, I got pretty lucky. Most of the hostels were right off trail or right in a town that the trail walked right through. But it still was relatively easy booking with them. I tried to do it like a day or two in advance, but even sometimes last minute you can. And I had so many trail angels letting me stay with them for free, offering to let me stay with them. There was one trail angel that contacted me on Instagram and offered for me to stay at her place. It just didn't really work out with timing, but it's really not that bad. You get used to it. You just look ahead usually after each time you go into town and see when your next town day will be, and it's not hard to plan it. Alright, so the next thing I learned is to hike your own miles and definitely lose groups if you need to. So I was pretty good about that on my past section hike. I did stick with a couple of northbound hikers for a little bit. I hiked with Bad Bat and 700. I hiked with Bad Bat for a week and then hiked with another northbound hiker, 700, for a couple weeks, but generally I was pretty good about hiking my own miles. You definitely don't want to stick with people and push their miles or hold yourself back if it's going to affect your hike or affect you physically. So I hiked with Bad Bat for about a week. We were doing between 15 and 18 mile days here and there, and I was definitely pushing myself to hike with her, but I didn't mind. It wasn't hurting me physically and we were having a good time. But like I said before, I was finding that I didn't love pushing big miles when it was more difficult for me than her, who had been hiking from Georgia. So 18 miles for her wasn't that big of a deal. She was more capable of that than me. So she wouldn't be exhausted by the end of the day like I would be. So after a while of hiking with her, we had a great time together, but she had to start pushing some 20-mile days because she had somewhere to be in a certain state at a certain time. So I ended up, separating from her. It stunk. I didn't want to be alone, but I knew that I had to do that because I wasn't going to be enjoying the hike as much mentally if I was pushing to keep up with her. Definitely need to, let people go if they're doing too much mileage or if they're not doing enough and you're not enjoying the hike because you're capable of pushing more. There's so many people on trail, you'll meet so many other people. I, ended up hiking with some people that matched my pace a little more. I was constantly meeting new people. And even the days I didn't have anybody to hike with, I usually saw people at camp or at shelters. Another thing I learned is that for me personally, section hiking is the way to go. I do feel like I enjoy the scenery and the miles more section hiking. Obviously this past section I did a longer section. I was out there for over a month. And while I did enjoy being out there for a longer period of time, and I would like to do more long sections in the future of the Appalachian Trail, I still find that after about a month I'm ready to go home and do some other things and then maybe go back out another time. Section hiking obviously has pros and cons. Some of the cons are that it's a little more difficult logistically and you never really get your trail legs, or if you do, you probably go home soon after getting them, so you always have to try to keep yourself in good physical shape and kind of start from scratch again every time you go out. But otherwise, I really enjoy section hiking. I find that I don't feel like I'm rushed. I'm not physically and mentally exhausted from being out on trail for long periods of time, so I enjoy every day more. I enjoy the miles more. I enjoy the scenery more. It doesn't get redundant for me. And I know personally for me, like, when I get to Maine someday, when I'm done with every other state, I feel like I'm going to enjoy Maine more and I want to take it in and enjoy every moment of it. Whereas I feel like some northbound hikers, by the time they get to Maine, they are exhausted physically, mentally, and emotionally, which is understandable. But I know a lot of people that get to Maine and they just want to be done. They just want to go home and they're just trying to get through and they're not enjoying it anymore. And I don't want my experience to be like that once I get to Maine, because personally I feel like Maine is the most beautiful state on the Appalachian Trail. So by section hiking, I'm hopefully going to enjoy Maine to its fullest, and honestly every other part of trail too. I can choose to do different parts when maybe if the weather is good, if I can try to be flexible with that, or during different times of the year, so what seasons I do certain parts in, maybe see some fall foliage during certain parts. And it gives me a long-term goal to work towards and something to constantly look forward to. So as much as I wanted to be able to thru-hike because I thought that that would be an amazing adventure and I would have loved to finish the trail this year, I do feel like section hiking is the way to go. And lastly, the last thing that I learned on this past section hike is that I am capable of hiking long distances. After my attempt in Georgia, I was really defeated, lost a lot of confidence. Like I said before, before I went out to Georgia, I had only hiked for 2 to 3 days at a time max. That's all the backpacking I had done. So when I went out to Georgia, I got super overwhelmed. I was looking too far ahead. I got in my head too much and I was doubting myself, and it completely made me lose interest and excitement in the trail. I just basically had a mental breakdown. And I thought that I wasn't capable of long distance backpacking. I thought that I should just go back to day hiking and that's all I was capable of. So going out on this past section, and I didn't put pressure on myself when I went out on this section. I told myself I want to do at least 100 to 200 miles. And once I got out there and I didn't have the pressure of feeling like I had to thru-hike, and I had a more clear mind and I could focus on what I was doing and be excited about what I was going to do, because I knew I could just stop whenever I wanted to without that pressure, I found that I was enjoying it way more. I was learning things. Like I said, this whole video is about what I learned. I was learning new things, becoming a stronger backpacker. I was getting used to the routine. There came a point where it was just normal. It felt normal to be out there. I definitely learned that I am capable of hiking long distance. I restored my confidence in myself and made myself more confident if I plan future long section hikes. And with that, the one piece of advice that I still have for people, if you're planning a thru-hike and have never backpacked before, is go out for more than a few days. Try to plan like a week or 2 backpacking trip before you attempt your thru-hike. That way you can tell if you are actually cut out for long distance backpacking. I went out for like a couple days shakedown hikes so that I could test my gear, and that went great. I did make sure my gear worked for me. but it didn't gauge how I would feel being out there for long periods of time. And when I think I knew that deep down when I got to Georgia, and that's how I got in my head. So if you go out for a couple weeks at a time and you make sure that you get used to that routine and that you do enjoy that back-to-back hiking and camping every day, you'll be way more successful in your thru-hike attempt. For some people, that's not the case. Some people can never backpack, go out and thru-hike and be successful, but that's my big piece of advice that I give people, because I wish I did that before I went to Georgia. Georgia was my shakedown hike. So yeah, I definitely learned that I can hike long distances on this past trip, which was really awesome. So that is my video. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you're interested in seeing videos from my past section hike, I did daily vlog. You can click on my channel, and I'm going to make a playlist as well, so it'll be easy to find all of the videos. But I daily vlogged every single day on my past section hike, so if you want to check those out, please do. Like I said, I also have a video on gear changes I made, so if you want to check that out, that's also on my channel. But thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!